do another session actually on journalism and technology, which the last session turns out to be in a way, though it was based on philanthropy and headed in that direction. This session is called Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Social Media 2015, and it features Vedica, Kant, Raghu, Karnad, and Himanshu Suri, who is possibly on his way. Both Raghu and Vedica are making their Goa Arts and Literary Festival debut. They both have most wonderful books out this year. I urge you to take a look at them and purchase them. They are available on the launch. Raghu Karnad has written one of the books of the year, I think, and it's a book that's going to last a very long time. It's called The Father's Field. It's a personal history as well as a history of Indians in World War II. It is absolutely wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And Vedica's book is also an absolutely marvelous contribution. It is a book about Indians in World War I. They're both historians, but both of them, in fact, have been in, and they've both written books on history. But I've been in touch with them, and in fact, gotten to know their work and what they're thinking and reading via social media. And I follow them both on Twitter, and we've been in touch over Twitter. In fact, I think my initial invites to both of them were on Twitter. Himanshu Suri, who might make his appearance midway through, he's on his way. Himanshu is a social media phenomenon. He's followed all over the world. He's had many social media moments. In fact, at his first appearance here at the Goa Arts and Literary Festival, he and Teju Cole were involved in a conversation that they both went back. Teju Cole is a Nigerian-American novelist, and then overnight, Himanshu, who was then going by the name of Heems, changed his name back to his original name of Himanshu, and Teju, and they both had immense Twitter firestorms. There was a global kind of a buzz. All of a sudden, people were aware that both these guys were in Goa and things were happening. This all happened over Twitter. And thousands of people follow Himanshu, and particularly he had his 911 experiences. He's released his early albums over the internet. He has a very popular Tumblr called Nehru Jacket. So he's used the internet as a means of artistic expression and also a means of communication. So it's a very, very interesting character when it comes to those things. I urge you to also watch his performance today. Very rarely in India do you get the opportunity to witness the cutting edge of rap music in the world, and he happens to be of Indian origin, which makes it even more interesting. And this is his fourth appearance at the Goa Arts and Literary Festival. So maybe you would like to start with conversations between yourselves, and we'll throw Himanshu in there when he arrives. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. Now, I think that to do justice to the theme of this session, you should have introduced me as @Karnad, and Vedica as @Vedica, and Himanshu at Himanshu. But further, we can sort of fix this format to better reflect its subject by inviting everyone who is in this room to participate equally with us. We are not experts, or perhaps everyone here is an expert. That's also in the nature of social media. So everyone feel free to jump in. Feel free to shout out like if you hear something that you approve of, and also feel free to scream abuse if you don't like what you've heard, or more constructive criticism. I think that would be, if we're going to be true to the subject, then we're going to have to do that. So when Vivek suggested this subject, my reaction was like my blood ran cold, because anyone who writes more conventional prose than the sort you find on social media has a very, very uncomfortable relationship with it. Very famously, Zadie Smith wrote, in her acknowledgements to NW, she gave an acknowledgement, she gave a credit to the software program Freedom, which is basically just an app that shuts down your Wi-Fi so that you don't do Facebook when you're trying to write a book. I also have that software program, but I've learned how to crash it. So
I was just thinking about Amitabh's book Lunch with a Bigot, where he talks about how you should take Freedom app and use it for 1 hour while you're writing. And so you guys love this stuff.
Both my was my master's dissertation as well as my book, I would just go off Facebook, and it kind of became a joke amongst friends that, oh, that means you must be actually doing some work, or it's got to a point where you can't do work because Facebook is too distracting, so you just deactivated your account. So it would be deactivate, then come online for a couple of days, and then disappear again. But I do agree with you that relationship and how distracting social media is for anyone who wants to seriously contemplate a long form prose writing is quite a difficult one.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have to try and move beyond our kind of like writerly resistance to social media.
You're still writing on social media,
yes,
and you're reducing clutter to put it into 140 words. So like the idea of writing every day, of strong sentences, of
punchy.
Exactly, is all contained in social media. So why the divide between I'm a writer and I have to stop doing social media to write when social media is writing, is what my question is to you guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one reason why the divide is because, like, the Twitter feed, I think, it probably has continuities with other kinds of writing and other kinds of media, with the tabloid maybe, with other sort of, smaller and smaller and tighter forms of communication. But I was looking at my Twitter feed sort of contemplatively before this session, and I thought, wow, this is really crazy. It's like joke, horrible rape. Here's a panda. Here's Donald Trump, and here's ISIS cutting off somebody's head. It's quite a bizarre and fragmented, intensely fragmented stream of information, which is obviously definitive of what's going on right now. So
what I wanted to also ask was just with the internet and with social media, there's a lot of, like you said, consumption of information at a quicker speed. Some people are ready for it, some aren't, and that's what I think about with social media. Like you can't, there's a lot of things being thrown out at a quick pace, and not everyone's ready to consume all of that, but I think it's positive that it's there for people to consume. I'm interested in the fact that you jumped to tabloid as if like there aren't other forms of like news on Twitter, but go ahead.
Can I just say, when you said tabloid, it made me laugh, because when I was talking about going off Facebook and Twitter, then my way of kind of procrastinating was to go to celebrity gossip sites. So the kind of final realization was that social media isn't necessarily the only thing that's going to distract you. There's plenty of stuff out there. And just coming back to your point about writers have to write. Being on social media is also a way of writing. Teju Cole, for example, is wonderful in how he uses Twitter to write these very contemplative sentences and sends out a multiple series of tweets, which is almost like reading a mini book.
Like.
Yeah. Well, you do that too, yes. But the other thing that I think, as a writer, what social media does, or even as a lay reader, what it does is it just lays out so much information at your door that is very, very easily accessible. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet very regularly. What I use it for is to just follow people I'm interested in, or follow news sources that I'm interested in, and the ability to have on one site such a vast array of information. I'm a historian, so I have everything from the British Library sending out tweets about newly found manuscripts. I lived in Turkey, so news on Turkey, news on India, news on British politics, because I now live in London. And it's amazing that you have one space where you're getting so much different information.
I think it speaks to the American nature of overconsumption.
It does, probably. Yeah.
And what happens when capitalism and technology and information and news sort of end up stirred in the same pot. But it's certainly interesting to be talking about social media at a literary conference, because at a literary festival, because we really have to. It really brings into sight the fact that though we may not recognize this most of the time, it really is enlarging the role or the appearance of writing and reading in our lives. We're all doing that much more reading and writing. We may not be satisfied with its nature, but there it is. So, so I mean, like, I want to talk to you guys about what it is that you do end up writing. How do you find yourself writing on social media?
Well, let's talk about the three things that they said. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Twitter is somewhat more literary, Instagram is more visual based, and Facebook, I don't know what people do on there. But I talk to my mom, that's it. So if you want to talk about literature, perhaps Twitter is more the one, yeah? How do I use it to write? I just use it like a notepad, which is the worst thing about me. That any thought I have, I want to broadcast, and that it's self-obsessed, and it's also writing.
Well, this is a social media panel, so let's just have a laptop open. I'm going to read some of your tweets. Let's see where it goes to read tweets. Yeah. Naresh started this. Naresh Fernandez actually, during the inaugural session, read a Twitter troll poem. So, sort of setting the tone, a found Twitter troll poem dedicated to Raghu. So I've just had a couple of random tweets. These are not like particularly well selected. I just snatched them up from both Himanshu and Vedica's feeds. Twitter feeds, mind you, so they're all within 140 characters. I'm so torn. I may like the sound of guns and the idea of death, but I hate the actuality of weaponry. Shut up, Himanshu. Lol. Gotta love that Gandhi's wedding gift to the Queen had Jai Hind woven into it. Young Thug. That is Young Thug, but with a J. The original expats. Till mid-1930s, the Viceroy of India was paid more than the President of the USA. Governor of UP, twice the salary of a British MP. All that money was, of course, coughed up by the Indian taxpayer. 2 tweets. How do I work in pop can lyrics into this highbrow literary panel I'm about to participate in?
The reggae artist. Yeah. Nobody knows who's talking about this.
He's a reggae artist. I'm a Rilkist. I would say my religion is. And finally, be the Zayn Malik you wish to see in the world. In case you don't know who Zayn Malik is, then you need to spend more time on social media, obviously. So yeah, I mean, these are exercised in writing. I know that when I write tweets, I spend a good deal of time editing them, maybe even more than I do the average sentence that I write to publish in an article. So Naomi, who I was chatting with over breakfast, had a very wonderful perspective on this. Is Naomi still in here? No. She said that if you view Twitter or Facebook or the writing that you put up on social media as self-publishing, which is really what it is. I mean, this is a form of print medium now. It's not on paper. Then it puts a very different spin on how you participate in it, and a more useful one, maybe.
I was just going to say, like, for me as an artist, everything has to go through my publicist for some magazine to sell ads for Ford. So for me, Twitter is just where I get to say what I feel and do without having it go through the lens of some male white writer talking about rap.
But just kind of coming back to that point, the way in which social media actually enables you to communicate with an audience or to people you want to reach out to. I mean, Vivek started the conversation by saying, you know, he first heard about my book on Twitter and reached out to me on Twitter and said, okay, I'd be interested in learning more about your book, and it's amazing that it gives you that platform. And I'd just like to go back a bit before the time of Twitter, and one of the strange things is that I actually started writing on, you know, blog posts that now seems, you know, ancient, but there was a time when there were a lot of people who were writing blogs, and Tejuko, for example. And so a lot of people that I became friends with through blogs are now people who are very active on Twitter, and are people who are actually now my editors quite often, who are working for magazines that I'm writing for. And it's amazing also to kind of observe the way in which social media in that sense has also transitioned. So from writing longer contemplative pieces to moving on from that, writing shorter, more pithy pieces of opinion, and in a way that is really what Twitter is. You're kind of just pontificating in a way. So it's been interesting to kind of observe those ups and downs. I'm not on Snapchat, but I think that's taking it to a whole different level.
I'm curious, so when I think of all this stuff, I think of self-curation. I think of curation in the digital age where everyone is now an artist and everyone is a writer and everyone is a curator. And your Facebook page is, these are the films, these are the songs, this is what I hope that girl or boy thinks I'm cool for. And, when I make an album, I think, what will this boy or girl want this album to say about them, not just what I'm saying. So we live in an age of hyper self-curation now via social media. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's really there's an easy conservative sort of instinct that I feel against that, which is, what is this? This is narcissism. This is vanity. This is all fabrication. This isn't who you really are. The person who you really are is who you are in your physical life, which is somewhat true, but I think also is probably missing the point and is not speaking to what even people who are younger.
Then you get into branding yourself and how much of social media is your personal brand and what type of brand you're trying to make. And so, yeah, you said you edit your tweets a lot. I don't do that. And so I'm trying to now, but.
I actually occasionally delete tweets where there are egregious typos. If it's kind of okay.
Do you use your drafts?
No.
Okay.
So then the question is, in the absence of an editor, if you're self-curating, if you're self-publishing, and there is no editor beyond the sort of the God algorithm that.
Okay, how do you as a writer elevate yourself beyond mass self-curation? As a curator, as a critic, as a writer, how do you separate yourself from this age where everybody is that and place yourself above it, so to speak? I don't want to do that, but if how do you do that?
I don't know. I guess this is we're coming to sort of some crucial points here. One is that you need to be a little bit aware of what's going on. Someone once, there was a conversation once in which I was involved, and someone said, "What is it like being a dude? What is it like being a dude? Having all that entitlement?" And someone else's answer was, "Oh, it's like Twitter. You think your opinion's really important, and you're always ready to fight." So that's not the thing that I want to celebrate about social media. Twitter, that's obviously a very prominent thing, and it turns into, as we see very frequently now, and maybe even more regularly, a readiness to silence women, a readiness to really, to shut down people, and a readiness to waste a lot of time with aggression and hostility that would never find a place in a live conversation. So I think that we could try and do something very constructive right here in the session, and but in a participative way, since I'm sure most of the people in this room are as much users and experts on social media as we are, which is talk about what rules you set yourself. And I'll start. My first rule is I don't fight anymore. I did that for my first 6 months on Twitter. There are people here who I don't even have to name who I was fighting with, and they'll know who I mean, because there are obvious monsters out there that tempt you to draw your sword. But obviously there's nothing more futile than having a political argument with someone with whom you can't find common ground on Twitter. So I'm curious about what other rules people apply to their online and social media participation. Please stick your hands up if you have something good.
Yeah, can I just quickly jump in? The other thing I wanted to ask was, And it's something I face because I work a 9-to-5 job, and then it becomes a question of, well, what personality are you representing on Twitter? Are you, are you the writer? Are you your corporate personality? Are you just your normal everyday person? I know I'm definitely not my corporate personality, but then it's still an open question as to what I'm doing with Twitter. And just to quickly come back before we go to the audio, to your point about social media as a curatorial means, and I actually feel quite often it's actually not just curation about your own personality or your own self, but I find it quite useful as a means to curate information that is available on the web, whether you're sharing it with other people, whether you're favoriting it, and yeah, true, exactly. But still, it's quite interesting to have it used in that way. At least I use it in that way. But kind of going back to the audience, I think it would be interesting. And there was a hand raised there.
So what I think is interesting about social media is the way that different people use different platforms. Like, for instance, for me, I use Twitter as like just whatever's like coming off the top of my head, like this stupid thing that I want to tell like my friends, but that I think is funny, but may not be like, I have less Twitter followers than I do Facebook followers. Like, my Facebook followers are like my mom, my aunt, friends, like former coworkers that I haven't seen in 10 years. And my Twitter followers are just like more people that I assume would like care about the random things that are going on in my head. So if I just like sort of want to say something and like feel whatever need to share it, I'll put it on Twitter. But if it's more for me like information sharing, that tends to be more Facebook, where I tend to reblog things or like share different articles. And then you have like Instagram, which I tend to have as like different, just what's going on in my life, but a little bit also more curated. And then now there's Snapchat, which is literally just like moment to moment, like this is what I'm doing, this is where I am.
So
yeah, I have a lot of social media.
Very American.
Yeah, I'm American. But what I was interested in that you guys haven't really touched on, I think you did at the beginning, was the way that people are using these social media aspects as a way to have like pseudo-literary publishing. Like recently there was a thing that went viral on Twitter, which was called, I think it was called Zolo's Story. And it was this woman just telling this really intricate story. She was like a stripper, and she went down to Florida, but it was like this very captivating, like well-written story that was all just tweets. It was probably like 100 tweets. And it's very unclear whether or not this is a factual story of something that happened in her life, or if it's something that she made up and decided to put on Twitter. And there's been a lot of writing, like, in Huffington Post and stuff, like sort of talking about, is this a new format of literary content? And there's another person that's on Instagram that actually posts pictures, but there's these long captions, and they're of things that happened a year before. So it's like commentary on her life a year before, like sort of an autobiographical sense. But so I don't know if you guys want to talk about that.
So how do you divide between your social media and like how much of yourself is involved in self-publishing? Right? Are you on? Mine is that's wow. I was going to say wow. Yeah.
I was going to say wow to all that she said. I'm a dummy. Jose coming anachronistic dinosaur. Now, I just want to ask a very stupid question. There is this series of books on the dummy this, dummy that.
Yeah.
Is there a book on social media for the dummy?
Definitely, you bet.
I mean, to learn that.
It's called the Internet for Dummies.
Just asking about the dummy books, just knowing that there was such a thing as the dummy, like Tots for Dummies is quite a meta dummy question.
I think it's important to talk about the dummy books at a literary festival. I think that's great. I think that's what we need more of, is the dummy books. But that's me. Yes. Thank you. To your question. Hello. Hello. Yeah. To your question about. Yeah, I don't know how to divide my social media into like what I'm trying to portray. I'm beginning to try to curate it better as I get healthier, and like, but it's yeah, I don't like long captions on Instagram. I like for the photos to represent themselves, and on Twitter I like reading, and on Facebook, like I said, I just want to talk to my sister and my mom. But you know, I think how you divide all of this is just self-branding, and like I try to move away from it because I don't want to think of myself as a brand. And as an artist, it's difficult to separate myself from my brand. And if I have to do that for work, then I shouldn't do it for fun. So that's something I struggle with. But you know. And your question, sir?
Yes.
Let me.
Okay.
I think we should come back to this, because I really like what you mentioned about Zolo stories, because one thing you see happening on Twitter is these personas emerging, sometimes entirely fictional personas. One that made a very big splash in India was Rushdie Explains India, which was and it was not Rushdie, it was someone mimicking Rushdie as and making sort of sagacious observations about India, which were very, very good. But there are even more like intricate and really kind of like abstruse identities and creatures that exist on, like there's a sort of a predator drone, like a neurotic predator drone that like blogs in the first, that tweets in the first person. It's fascinating to read.
My favorite is Dr. Majorly expert PhD who kind of explains, poses as an expert on Pakistan and explains, Pakistani society through these very like completely hilarious and superficial tweets.
And one thing at least one thing that's fascinating about this is that there's clear talent, like top grade talent and imagination and time and work going into creating these personalities, these stories, whatever this Twitter fiction is. But there's no authorship. Eventually someone might come up and be like, I was the guy behind the drone or the bear or something like that. Okay, or maybe they sell t-shirts after that, but at least in the moment, it doesn't always come. I never know who these people are, and I think that's fascinating because it's real literary talent being deployed without authorship. Yeah. Unreal Mama.
Yeah, they started with Twitter. They went on to having a
Mike, please.
stage. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's fine. Let us speak. Please speak.
They went from Twitter to...
Two software engineers who started tweeting as Unreal Mama, and they would come up with really ridiculous. Bad day at the clinic, I would go and log on because they would have something really ridiculous. Something like, I remember one question they had was, what if Rahul Gandhi turns 40 today, what will happen next year? The answer is he turns 41. And you had a whole lot of stuff coming up. It's that crazy. They went on to a news page, and eventually they come up with a book, which is again very hilarious take on the 2014. So they sort of built up their image and went on, and maybe that's something that people do.
I have to hear him first.
Yes, you see nowadays social media has become a very powerful tool for social commentary, political commentary. In fact, I personally use Facebook a lot to vent out my frustration with the political situation and stuff in India. But at the same time, people who do so on Twitter, they're exposing themselves to a lot of backlash from political parties, the religious fundamentalists, social groups, a lot of hate mail, a lot of bullying online. At the same time, there are other instances such as there's Shobha Day who was she was mobbed at her house by a certain political party. There was also a case where this white woman, she was traveling to Africa. She tweeted saying, "I'm going to Africa. Thank God I'm white. I won't get AIDS." And she meant it as a joke. It was a little racist. She meant it as a joke. But because of that, people gave her so much hate. She lost her job. She was completely ostracized by society. She contemplated suicide.
There was even a DD News anchor who made a lot of mistakes during one of her news reports, and she was completely humiliated and mocked by people, common people like you and I. So when you go up there, when you are tweeting or when you are posting something on Facebook, do you feel the pressure of self-censorship or getting it absolutely right? Are you afraid of being politically incorrect or being perceived as racist?
Yeah, America is extremely politically correct these days, and I'm bad at it. And I have a tendency, because of the neighborhood I grew up in, to often use the N-word as an endearing term for my friends, and I've had to censor myself on Twitter to not do that because people don't know where I'm from or how I was raised, and I shouldn't use that word. But I have this issue of restraint with social media is quite interesting to me because I'm trying to learn it. And the underlying idea is that social media is just a person. I think it's just a digital extension of how we behave, right? And we hope that people behave well, and but it doesn't always happen. But I think the freedom of Twitter to allow people to speak with this kind of barrier of the internet is liberating as a person or as a writer. So I think it's like anything else. There's some things to embrace there and some things to be wary of. Censorship and self-censorship is interesting. And again, to me, it comes back to branding and what you want your brand to be. And this idea of some people have one Twitter account, and then they get sick of it, and they have their Twitter followers, and then they start a new one to hide from their other Twitter account. And I would call myself a Twitter rapper. I've made my career off of Twitter, and so I mean, that's it. Yeah.
I also wanted to say the whole idea of with Twitter, the opinionating that you get. And you might have an opinion on one thing, and you might actually just not have an opinion on another thing. And then it kind of almost becomes a question of, well, if you had an opinion on this, why didn't you have an opinion on that? And that becomes a bit of a fuzzy line. Where do you draw the line? How do you decide what to have an opinion on, what not to have an opinion on?
I think you put your finger on a kind of paradox about social media, and especially about Twitter, which is that it works, and it seems to work on the one hand as an echo chamber, and it gets that criticism, which is people who are on Twitter are only hearing other voices like themselves. You follow people like you, you're followed by people like you, there's too much approbation. In the old days, everyone would read one of the same few newspapers, and there would be a variety of positions and of news, but here you're getting this sort of intensely selected set of opinions and news that maybe sound too much like you yourself. But on the other hand, there's also this potential for massive exposure that happens on Twitter, which people may not be prepared for. And that applies as much to political, but it also applies to the arts in different ways. Because think about what happened with the AIB comedy roast, right? They made a lot of extremely vulgar and fairly unsalubrious jokes about people who were in the audience, and everyone who was in the audience, in that physical audience, was in on it, and they were down with it. Now there's a slightly larger audience which you can define as maybe the sort of the Independent Republic of South Bombay or just metropolitan India, which was also probably by and large prepared for this thing. There's even a larger audience that was obviously not prepared for it and was willing to push back against it with a criminal case. And the point is, there is no way anymore to address only your audience. Your audience could always potentially be infinite.
Is India as a society prepared for social media?
Anyone out there? Vivek, you want to jump in on this?
No, let's take a couple of questions.
I just asked the question.
Who wants to answer Himanshu's question? Is India prepared for social media? Let's take someone who is on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram in the audience here. Anyone?
Nobody.
Here we go. All right.
She's actually on Twitter right now.
The official Twitter handler for GALF.
Okay. It's now live to everybody. But we used to call it live tweeting, and now it's just live. Go for it. Sorry.
Okay, so you said is India prepared for social media, right?
Yeah, are you?
So I don't think the question doesn't arise. India is participating as much in social media as any other country, to the extent we have internet penetration.
It's specific for here, but I understand that. My
Right.
question would be for any society, but
Yeah.
we're here.
So to the extent we have internet penetration, we have participation. Where does that question come from? Is my question.
It's not participation, it's preparation that I was asking for. I have a personal belief that people aren't ready for the education that the internet gives them right now, and it leads to a lot of problems in our world.
What happens in any society?
I said any society, but for the context of this conversation, I wanted to put it in India. But I agree.
Well, right now, India is going through a phase where the narrative is becoming very homogenized. We're trying to get a single narrative, and we're trying to portray the entire country as one community or one ideology, which just isn't India. So social media can help us diversify our opinions and get new perspectives.
Yeah.
It can even bring about social change, because there are a lot of social evils in India. You've seen the Arab Spring, how the Arab Spring was brought about through Facebook, through the posts of Facebook and Twitter, I guess. So India definitely needs social media right now to expose the masses to the world out there in different worldly opinions, and save us from succumbing to the narrative of the politicians and political parties.
Okay, couple more questions. As Christopher suggested, try to keep it in 140.
I just want to throw one interesting thing out there, which is this all different social media. When you begin to sort of plumb its depths, can teach you many different things. And I learned one of these things when the porn ban, when the BJP mooted a ban on online pornography. One thing that Twitter allows you to do is see who follows a certain account that you might be following. And to my great amusement, I found that there are a fair number of BJP functionaries, I mean people who are followed by Narendra Modi, who follow porn stars on Twitter. So when you're talking about India needing to expose itself to many influences and ideas, that's a good example. At least hopefully they're not doing it in the assembly, like famously happened in Karnataka. But that's there.
Yeah. To the question which was posed, whether India is prepared for social media, I would say it's how the question should be how India is responding to social media, and how Indians are using it as opportunity. There have been some surveys on media, the mainstream media, the print, etc., and that shows that media in our country, more than 90% of those posts are held by the upper caste. So our media is largely upper caste dominated. Where social media you have that voice there. It's more democratic in that term. So people can express what is not being heard in media. For example, when this Operation Black Rain by this Cobra post was came out, mainstream media they didn't cover it at all. These were online media, social media was literally exploding with feeds on that. So
can you quickly say what that operation was?
That was on Ranveer Sena, and it was a new expose on that from Cobra Post. So yeah, and that was not covered at all. There was a press conference in Delhi, and that was not covered by the mainstream media. But social media, online media, they covered that event, and that was a very important event if you look back. So yeah, how social media is responding to this democratization of media. I will not say it's completely democratic medium, but yeah, that somehow helps.
It's a good
those
point.
Marginalized, those other people of this country which are not so much privileged.
And we won't have enough time to really talk about journalism and social media, which are becoming very twinned right now and aren't really separable. The corollary to what you just described is that that's a really long conversation, and we probably don't want to go there. The corollary to what you just described is that other journalistic norms, which are important to the news, are starting to erode and to disappear from social media. And I'm very worried about this, especially people who are professional reporters online. Questions like attribution, questions like giving credit, and especially the very honorable journalistic tradition of correcting yourself when you've made a mistake no longer holds true on social media. And journalists who are still journalists online seem to be drifting away from some important moorings.
Quick question. Obviously, this festival is bored of the issue that India is an intolerant society. When did social media get bored of it?
Yeah, I don't think we're bored of it. I just think we need to find different language to continue that debate in. I think we figured out that the word intolerant wasn't really what anyone meant, and we were all sort of chasing each other around in circles using it.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, for a fabulous panel. I think that word, it's an excellent question by